Whew. Um, Hi, welcome back to Redefine Fitness. I'm your host, Kelsey Wells, and today's episode is all about allergies. I don't actually know where to start. I think I'll start at the beginning, but I first want to preface this episode by saying that this is going to be, there will be an episode following mine with some very special guests in who are pioneering kind of the research and the awareness of anaphylaxis and life-threatening allergies in America. And before I sit down with them, and in the wake of me beginning that petition, I felt like I needed to do this and I needed to share my personal experiences and my personal story with living with a life-threatening allergy. I've wanted to open up about this many times. I think that I haven't done so until now, ultimately because I wasn't really ready. I, of course, am an advocate for vulnerability, but vulnerability demands authenticity. And there's a difference between sharing something vulnerably from a safe and healed place when, how, and with whom you are ready, and just oversharing or sharing out of pressure or anything like that. So I think maybe in the past, this is something that's obviously very close to my heart. This has impacted my life in more deeply than maybe anything else, including the Mormon religion or parallel to. This is something that shapes the reality of this human life for me. And that makes it more difficult because I do know that every time I speak about something, there's a lot of support, which I'm so grateful for, but there's also hate and backlash and people who get upset, and that's out of my control. But to open up on something like this and share a couple of my personal experiences, I don't think I was yet ready to do so because the fear of that backlash or criticism or being made fun of or belittled or minimized on this particular subject was weighing too heavily for it to be a safe share for me. But I have come to this place where I am fully ready, still very vulnerable and a little bit nervous, but very ready to share my experience for the singular reason of, well, I guess it's not just singular reason, it's twofold. For the reasons of, first and foremost, raising awareness of the severity of life-threatening allergies, the reality of life-threatening allergies, and sharing and kind of helping people glean understanding of what that actually means and looks like for millions of people across the world and millions of children across the world. And also, the second reason is to help others in the allergy community know that they're not alone. I don't have anyone in my life, and I've never had anyone close to me in my life who has a life-threatening allergy. And it has been very alienating many times. And it can feel isolating. And so I just want to say that there are so many of us, and I kind of wanted to come forth and show that you can still live a beautiful, full life. You can overcome the majority of your food fear and live cautiously and carefully without living from a place of fear. You can travel. You can eat in a way that supports your body's needs and nutrition, and do so and learn how to do so without obsession or paranoia. And I wanted to kind of start by saying that because all of those things at different times in my life, especially growing up, I didn't know or feel like those things would be possible. So here I am, and here we go. I guess I'll start at the beginning. I put up a question box on my Instagram stories of what people with food allergies would like other people to know, which I will read some of those at the end of the episode. And then also just questions like what people who don't have food allergies want to know, or questions you might have. And many of you asked about my personal situation. So you wanted to know how long I've been allergic, what I'm allergic to. And I guess let's just go back to the beginning. So I've lived with this allergy my entire life. My particular allergy is quite unique because I am anaphylactically allergic to both peanuts and tree nuts. These are actually very separate allergies. Most people who are anaphylactically allergic to peanuts are not anaphylactically allergic to tree nuts because peanuts are a legume. They're not a tree nut. And that is why it is very important to specify if you're allergic to nuts or peanuts or both. I am allergic to both, both as severe. Interestingly enough, I am not allergic to almonds anymore, which is something that I don't understand. It's one of the greatest miracles of my life, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But every other tree nut besides an almond, as well as peanuts, would kill me quite quickly and pretty immediately if I consumed even trace amounts of it through an anaphylactic reaction, which I wanted to also describe what is anaphylaxis. So essentially you swell up and everyone sees, people with hives or a puffy face or puffy swollen lips or ears, and they think that that's funny, but it's not funny because what also swells up when you have an anaphylactic allergy is your throat. And you die technically by suffocation when you die of an anaphylaxis. So back to the beginning. So my mom found out that I had my allergy when I was 18 months old. I, of course, don't remember that. I'll quickly tell the story as she's told me. Basically, I ate peanuts and tree nuts quite often as like a toddler. I loved peanut butter, muffins. Like we had nuts in our home. Obviously, they're a great source of a lot of nutrients and healthy fats. And so I ate nuts a lot. And one day I had an allergic reaction that manifested in just like hives, like a rash. And she called the doctor and they're like, oh, she probably has an allergy. I want you to keep a list of what she's eating so we can like get down to it. It wasn't a super severe reaction, but it was extreme, like on my skin. And so she started keeping a little food diary for me. And I think it was the next day. I should have had her come on here to make sure I got the story straight. But essentially, sometime later, very soon, it happened again. And she had given me like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but she didn't think that it could have been that because I had it all the time. And I had been having it for so long. And it didn't happen immediately after eating the peanut butter. So she was like, maybe, but I don't think so. And then I believe it was the very next day, she gave me a piece of like a banana nut muffin that had walnuts in it. And right as I ate the muffin at the counter in front of her, she watched as I just broke out in very severe hives. My lips started to puff up. I started to swell up. She called 911. And long story short, they tested me and I had seemingly overnight developed a very severe anaphylactic allergy to both tree nuts and peanuts. They test for allergies, for severe food allergies in two ways, via a blood test and also by what they call a scratch test. The blood test measures, we'll get all into the science of it on the next episode, but essentially it measures levels in your blood. And as to my understanding, which it has been almost 2 decades since I talked to a doctor and they really explained this part to me. So I'm excited for next week's conversation. But essentially they told me there's 2 ways that you can be life-threateningly allergic to something, in your blood or in like your tissue. And they test the blood levels, and anything over, like we all have kind of intolerances. like 0.05, I might be allergic to something, but if it's a 1 or a 1 point something or higher than a 1, then that would be life-threatening. And then also on your skin with the scratch test, what they do is it used to be little needles, but now they do like little super sharp plastic tips, and they prick you, and they inject just like the tiniest like lab distilled trace amount of the protein of the allergen, which is what causes the reaction. And then they measure in millimeters the hives or the welts that swell up on your skin from the pricks. And again, with a certain measurement of welts, they have a control welt, like a prick that's like your normal histamine reaction. And then however much bigger your welts are with the contagions, that's how they know how allergic you are. So via my scratch tests and my blood tests, I was off the charts, very severely anaphylactic, life-threateningly allergic to peanuts and tree nuts. And at first we went every year to get tested, both my blood test and my scratch test. And I do remember, I don't remember the first few years, of course, but I remember it being a normal part of my life. And I remember by the time I was in elementary school, I used to dread this day of going to get allergy tested. And I think it's just, it's not fun ever to get pricked by needles. It's scary. But I always had this secret hope that one day they would like measure and I would grow out of it. Like, I was like, why can't that happen? And I just really would pray really hard that I would be cured. And every time I would just be super, super sad and deflated because I wasn't. And that's a whole other thing to unpack about that. But essentially, when I got into high school, I remember them kind of saying like, hey, you don't need to come every year. You're definitely allergic. And the odds of outgrowing an allergy like this are slim to none. They pretty much said by the time you're 16, you don't grow out of anaphylactic allergies. You can develop them later in life, but you don't come out of them. When babies and infants have allergies, which I was allergic to other things when I was a newborn, they often grow out of those allergies and intolerance type of allergies. But when you grow into an anaphylactic allergy, the research says it's usually permanent in your life. And so they pretty much told me the chances are 0. You don't have to come back as regularly. There's no point. And so we started going every other year. And then it was, I think when I graduated high school, I just kind of told my parents, like, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to subject myself to this. I know that this is my reality and there's no point in going to the doctors anymore. And of course they honored that decision. And then something came out, called NAET. I believe it stands for Nambudrapod's allergy elimination technique. And it was this new science from this doctor who Ryan was on his mission. So I would have been like my sophomore year of college. We found out about this. My parents' friends had someone who had success with their allergy using this method. And so even though we had tried anything and everything before, and again, the type of allergy that I have is just too severe, it's not something that you can take a shot for. I was like, of course I'm willing to try it. So for months I went to this center, which there are centers all over the world who are qualified in this NAET technique. And I put all my faith and hope into this. And I thought, why not? And it had to do with electromagnetic fields, and I would hold different vials of things. And, it's quite a little complicated thing, but I had to go a lot. And I did it perfectly exactly as they said. And then at the end, they were like, okay, you should be cured. And I just, went back to my allergy doctor for the first time in years because I thought, wow, like what if this did make a difference? And even in my head, I'm like, even if it's not as severe as it was, that would be a win. But I didn't have super high hopes at the same time. And so I went back to my allergy doctor, and my doctor had actually passed away, who I loved, who looked after me my whole life. And I went to a new allergy doctor, and they got the blood test and the scratch test. And they said, okay, you are allergic to all like tree nuts and peanuts, and pretty much gave me a very stern slap on the wrist. And he was like, what were you doing? Like, why would you do this? This is risky. This is ridiculous. Like I was pretty much mocked for trying a different technique, and kind of sternly told like that your allergy is beyond these things. And that was hard to take, because I'm like, first of all, like, don't judge anyone for trying something. But yeah, and then he said my results, you're allergic to peanuts and all tree nuts except almonds. And I was like, I'm allergic. What do you mean? And he was like, yeah, as I said, it didn't work. You're allergic to peanuts and all tree nuts except almonds. And I said, I'm allergic to almonds. And he said, no, you're not. And I was like, no, I am. And he was like, you're not. Like, look at your blood test, nothing. Look at your scratch test, like you're not allergic to almonds. And he did not believe me that I used to be allergic to almonds just as severely as all the other nuts. And he requested my old records to be, like, my transcripts from my whole life to be sent over. And when they came, he was just shooketh. He was like, I've never seen nor heard of anyone growing out of an allergy like this to any degree. Could not believe it. And he was very keen. He was like, I want to do an inpatient, like, or like an in clinic like test, and I want you to eat almonds, and I want to, like, you're not allergic to them. And at first I said no, because I just wanted to continue to pretend like I was allergic to almonds too, because it's just too hard to tell people I'm allergic to all nuts except almonds. And also it was very psychologically a weird place to be, but also I couldn't help but feel like, wow, this is something I've prayed for my whole life. And I always had said, like, if I could only eat one nut, it would be almonds, because almond milk and almond flour and the health benefits, and they were very on trend. And most of the time, the things that I wanted to eat, they had almonds. They were kind of like a very common, of all the tree nuts, the most common. And so Ryan and I, well, okay, let me I feel like I have to back up. So it wasn't immediately after the Nayette that I found out about the almonds. I'm all remembering now. So basically I did the Nayette treatment, and then I did the test, and they told me this didn't work. You shouldn't have done this, kind of slap on the wrist. And then I went back to my normal life as I knew it. And it was about a year after that, or maybe 2 years after that, because Ryan had come home. We'd gotten married. God, it must have been like 5 years, because Anderson was born. And Anderson was almost exactly 1. Weird. So I had a big scare. I did the Nayette treatments. I went back to the doctor for the first time in a while. They said it didn't work. I kept living my life as I knew it. And then it must have been about 4 or 5 years later, I had gotten married, had Anderson, and Anderson was almost exactly 1. And I'll tell you soon why I remember that. And I had the scariest incident of my life. And I do want to share it. I have had, in my life, I have been very, very diligent. I've done everything right. I always ask. I always double check ingredient labels, ask restaurants a million times, very careful with which restaurants I go to. I hardly eat at other people's homes. And if so, it's only when when I've asked, and like, I'm as careful as you can be. But throughout my life, I have had a handful of times where I've had to take my EpiPen even still. And I'm not going to share all of those, but I am going to share this one. every time I had a close call, aside from this time, I had my EpiPen. And this time I didn't. And if you can hear Pynton, I'm sorry. My studio's in my basement. I was at my mom's house and it was a Sunday. I always have my EpiPens in my car and my purse. We had just come from church and I don't bring my purse to church. I don't eat at church and I don't need my wallet or anything. And we drove Ryan's car that day. Sure, we should have EpiPens in both cars, but we didn't at the time. And right after church, I had swung by my mom's house to put Anderson down for a nap, and we had started to prep Sunday dinner. And my parents are absolute angels on this earth. And as a parent now, I just wanted to pause and say, like, to all the allergy parents out there, my heart goes out to you so much, because I would tenfold rather be the one with an allergen than be a parent. Because thinking about Anderson, living with this and knowing that you can't always control or protect would be, I feel, more terrifying and harder. So just sending you so much love. But my parents also always kept an EpiPen at their home. And anyway, we're in the kitchen and my mom said, "Oh, I got these new kale chips from Costco and you'd love them." Like, she knew I was like eating healthier, and we like to snack while we cook. Who doesn't? So, of course, before she handed me the box and before I ate one, I read the ingredient list and it said kosher, non-GMO, it said gluten-free, it said organic, and it had the full ingredient list, and it didn't say anything about nuts, didn't say anything about allergens. So, of course, I was like, cool. And I didn't expect it to. They're literally like dehydrated kale with some seasoning on it. So I popped one in my mouth and immediately I spit it out. And I just go, "Oh my God, Mom, these are so spicy." And she just looked at me and she goes, "They're not spicy." And we looked at each other, and within a split second, we both knew. And I ran to the bathroom, which was adjacent to the kitchen, and I looked in the mirror, and immediately I could see my lips puffing up. This is within 6 seconds. And then my tongue started to swell up, and I remember looking at myself in the mirror and making a choice to be calm. Because if I started having a panic attack or crying hard, then I wouldn't be able to breathe anyway, and I wouldn't be able to tell if I was suffocating. And so I walk out of the bathroom, and again, this is all very rapid succession. And my mom had, when I went to the bathroom, she'd gone to her cupboard to get her EpiPen. And I saw her, and she was holding the box, and she just said, "It's empty." And we found out later that I think one of my little brother's friends had used it or taken it or needed it. And we didn't know that she didn't have one. And we looked at each other, and she opened her mouth to scream for Ryan. And he came bounding up the stairs from the basement at that exact moment. And he was running up the stairs, and he just said, my mom just threw him the keys. And later he told me that he just was sitting there watching sports, like, while Anderson napped. And he said he had a feeling. He just had a feeling that something was wrong. So truly, within 25 seconds of me putting this kale chip in my mouth, spitting it out, Ryan and I were in the car, in my mom's car, going 100 miles an hour down her neighborhood streets to get me to the hospital. And I remember him he just kept saying, "You're okay. I love you so much. You're okay." And I was laying across like the back 3 seats, just trying to be really calm. And I remember vividly just looking at him out of the corner of my eye, and I wasn't saying anything. And I was just thinking about him and Anderson, and about a minute into the drive, it felt like I was breathing through like a coffee stir stick, like I couldn't really get breath. And every other time in my life, I'd had an EpiPen immediately when I needed it, and things didn't get this far. So to be experiencing what I've always been warned of my entire life, I knew that I wasn't going to make it in time to the hospital. And Ryan said, "We're almost there." And in my head, I thought, no, we're not, because I'd lived here my whole life, and I knew that the closest hospital was about a 15-minute drive, 12 if you were driving like we were, 10 minutes maybe. And I knew I didn't have that. And as if he read my mind, he said, "No, we're almost there. The new hospital. Remember, the new hospital just opened." And truly 3 weeks prior to this, there was a hospital that had just opened in Draper, Utah, very close to my parents' house, and we were almost there. And I just remember it's really interesting because I would say that there were 2 times in my life, this being one of them, where I really thought that it was maybe the end of my time in this life. And both those incidents were almost a decade apart, but I remember thinking the same things, and there wasn't ever a thought for me or for anything I was working on or programs I was writing or how my body looked or felt or aspirations or goals or dreams. All I could see was the people that I loved, and I just so desperately hoped that those that I loved would know how deeply I loved them. And I wondered if I had lived my life in such a way that if that were my last day, and if the last things I said to them were the last things I'd ever say, and the last conversations were the last memories we'd ever made, had I lived my life in such a way that I would somehow champion them beyond the grave, that when they thought of me, my memory might bring them some kind of peace in their grief. And I don't remember anything beyond him saying we're almost there until I remember coming to in a hospital bed chair, and I had an IV in my arm. And Ryan was there by my side, and what happened is I had lost consciousness briefly. And he'd pulled up to the entrance of the ER and screamed, "Help, she's in anaphylactic shock." And what I didn't know then that I know now is that that's like a code, like a stroke code. There's certain emergencies like cardiac arrest and anaphylaxis and a stroke that when you go into an ER, they have processes in place and they know exactly what to do to give that patient the best possible chance of help. And within seconds of him grabbing me out of the car and holding me and screaming this, they had ushered us back and given me 2 EpiPens and hooked me up to an IV with Benadryl, and I was okay. I mean, I wasn't immediately okay, but I was alive and I would be okay. And I just can't begin to describe the way that a near-death experience like that at least in my case, stays with you. And I do think, obviously, the fact that I didn't have my EpiPen, I felt it was my fault. It's impossible to think about the fact that my family, my husband and my son almost lost me because I was reckless, which I wasn't being reckless. You know, it's like I checked the label. My parents, I knew I didn't have my purse, but I knew that I was at a place that had an EpiPen, you know, like it was accidental. But the thing is with allergies is it doesn't matter because you can be so careful, but you can't ever know for sure. And of my handful of experiences and scares and situations that I've gone through, this one is one of the 2 worst. And I will never forget the look on the doctor's face. If we had to go to that other hospital, I would not have made it. I wouldn't have made it if we took a minute longer to get there. And he made that pretty clear. And it turns out that the company had sold these, they had mislabeled their products, and they knew that, and they remedied that by selling them in Costco in a pack of 2. So it was 2 big packs of kale chips that each had their own ingredient labels, and then they put them together and put like a wrapper around them that had a fine print saying contains cashews. They were actually coated in powdered cashew dust. That was the main flavor. Obviously that's illegal. My mom didn't know. She didn't even see the fine print on there. She bought it from Costco, tore off the thing keeping them together, and put them in her pantry. And Ryan reached out to the company, and it turns out that we were the 4th case of anaphylaxis from this exact product being mislabeled, and nothing had been done. Something was done after my case because Ryan made sure of that, and all the product was recalled. And I think they offered like a gift card or something, which is wild to me. But all that to say, the fact that it took 4 people and still no change had been made and no care was given was very deflating, because it's just yet another example that people don't know or don't care or just truly don't understand, because I have to believe that if you did understand, you would care. So it was then that we decided to go back to my allergy doctor. We'll find a new one because Ryan wanted to come with me. He had been my partner. I mean, we'd been together over 10 years at this point. Well, maybe 8 years together, I think. And I had never taken him with me, and he'd never seen me do an allergy test or anything like that. And I just felt like it was important to get obviously new EpiPens, which unfortunately you have to have a prescription for in the United States. And it's insane because it's not easy. I think I waited, even after this incident, I think I had to wait up to a month to even see my allergy doctor. And of course, there are ways to get your prescription or contact your doctor without seeing them, but I had to find a new doctor. And the accessibility to EpiPens is absolutely inexcusable. It's just wrong. They should not be gate kept like they are. And in other countries, they're not. And now whenever I travel to Australia, I buy 4 of them at the airport on my way home every time. And I can do that just over the counter, which is how it should be. They're still expensive, but they're not even a seventh as expensive as they are in the United States with a prescription. So all that to say, I went to get new allergy testing at that point after that incident. I wanted to understand if my allergies had gotten worse because obviously I'd lived with this my whole life and been told that they're very severe, but I had never had an experience or a reaction like that instantaneous. And by the way, my face didn't bloat up. I didn't have hives all over my body. I didn't look deformed like you see depicted in movies or commercials. I had very slight swelling on my lips. My tongue was very hot. And then it was straight to, I was suffocating.